Good morning. I'm a fourth-year PhD student. I guess I'm actually a candidate now. And this is about research in progress for those people who are filling out forms. So first, let me give you kind of an overview of my dissertation work. I started out really just studying salamanders. And then with ICON, I've broadened that to include some elements of the human system. But I work in Macon County, North Carolina, which is considered to be a rapidly exurbanizing community. Exurbanization is the process of people from cities moving into rural areas in search of natural amenities such as, scenery, recreation opportunities, things like that. Macon County is situated in the southern Appalachian Mountains, which is also a hotspot of salamander diversity. And unfortunately in this area, there's a really weak regulatory environment. There's very little zoning in the unincorporated parts of the county. There is some zoning in the two major cities. Well, I guess they're more like towns, actually. But there are these strong and active local land trusts in the area that kind of fill in for the weak regulations that are there. And they do that by receiving donated conservation easements on private properties. They also sometimes purchase land and kind of hold on to it until a state agency can get its funds in order to purchase that land and protect it. So the main objective of my project has been to try to combine salamander habitat modeling with spatially explicit local land use values of the people who live there to identify places that should be acquired for conservation or preservation because there's a low level of conflict there and because of the high quality habitat opportunities that they would provide. So for this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on the participatory mapping work that I've done because a lot of people have asked me about that. And I've kind of gone through this evolution of the process for increasing participation in this work. So, so the first round of my work took about 7 months. I did 3 mapping sessions and I only had 9 participants, which was kind of a letdown. So here, this is sort of an example of what my presentation looked like. It was really focused on salamander ecology. It was focused on my dissertation, my research, and what the people who are participating were going to contribute to that research. So I organized my own events at public libraries. I called the library. I said, hey, can I have your meeting room for such and such a time? And then I sort of did my own advertising. I wrote articles for the newspaper. I contacted the local land trust to send out emails to their volunteer lists to try to get people to show up. And I did contact a few well-connected individuals in the community to try to get them to spread the word. And I also had this informative flyer that I made up that I put in my emails, and it had this, free snacks if you come, things like that. But it didn't really work that well, obviously, because I only had 9 people. So for round 2, I adjusted things. So this is more like what the presentation looked like. It was more informative for the people who came. So it's telling them about what is the federal regulatory landscape in your community? What is the state level regulatory landscape? What organizations are there at the county level that get involved in land use planning and things like that? And then I included information about the local land trusts and the role that they can play in the community. And so because I adjusted things to be more informational and to actually provide something useful to the people who were coming to help me, I think that actually did help people to want to become involved. And so then I also modified my recruitment strategies. I went to groups that were already known for hosting presentation style events with kind of a green or eco sort of flavor to them. So one thing I did was I went to the county library. They have their own event calendar, and so if you do an event through them instead of just renting a room, they'll put it on their calendar, which people already know to look for. They'll put up flyers and stuff around the library. They do their own kind of advertising, and they actually also put it on the newspaper event calendars. So the local newspapers have those as well. And then I also went to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship's Eco Forum, it's kind of like a church, but it's like a non-religious kind of church. It's like a spiritual church, I guess, kind of. And they do this thing called the Eco Forum, where they have somebody come and talk about an issue. And so I went and did that. And it was really great because people already know to come to the event. They already know that they like the things that people talk about. And so they showed up, and they have a dinner beforehand. And so you could sit down and really talk to participants and get to know them, and they could get to know you. And people become sort of more interested in your work and what you're doing. But I think probably the most important thing is that the groups have established advertising channels, which means that they already have these ways of spreading information and people know to look for that. And so it really helps to get more activity. And so I did these 2 sessions. I did them in about a 3-month period, and I got 14 participants, which is quite a bit more than my previous efforts. So I'm still in the planning phase of my round 3. It's probably going to be this spring. I started doing some interviews with influential community members, and I found that really one person leads to another. People tell you about groups and things that you didn't know about. And also meeting with these people face to face and really investing in the interview process is a way to build rapport with people, and then they kind of offer you things afterward that maybe they wouldn't have if they hadn't met you in person. And this is maybe really obvious to people who work in more sociological fields than I do, but for an ecologist this was really sort of interesting and new. And so yeah. And so here are some early findings of the demographic data that I collected along with the mapping exercise. So unfortunately, I think that my sample of people is not terribly representative of the community in a lot of ways. So one big thing is age. I had mostly people over 70. I had a couple of people who were 30. So they really are representing, people who have retired to the community, not people who grew up there, not people who've lived there for a long time. They're retirees, they're second homeowners. They've been there, I think on average, like 13 years. And so I'm really missing out on the community of people who grew up there and whose families have been there for a long time. Additionally, if you look at the education statistics, people who came to my presentations and events were generally much higher educated than people who live in the county. Most people in the county have a high school degree, and very few people have been to college there. So me having 35% graduate or professional degrees and 41% college degrees is pretty different. Additionally, the per capita income, which is just like take all the income and divide it by the number of people in the community, was $24,000. I had 4 individuals who made over $100,000, and on average, everybody else who I sampled made between $36,000 and $46,000 per year. So we have much wealthier people, much better educated people, and much older people, which is kind of what I expected, but the data definitely shows that that's the case. And then I threw together this, oh, come on. No. All right, well, I kind of remember what some of these are. These two over here are agriculture. This is planted agriculture, and this is like livestock. This is recreation down here. This is nature preserves that are open to the public. This is conservation easements. This is really crappy that that's not showing up. But anyway, so what this is trying to show is I asked people to list their top land use values from 1 to 10, and these were their number 1 choices, cell range and cell range. And so it was interesting to me because there was this broad interest in agriculture, and so it seems like what this particular segment of the population wants is they want to retain the agricultural character of the community, and they also want to see forest land be protected. And then typically in people's second and third land use choices, they would start to say things like, some housing development or some development for recreation, things like that. And so people do see development as being a pressure in the community and something that needs to happen, but they certainly also see these conservation or preservation or, maintaining the rural flavor of the community to be something important as well. And then the last thing I wanted to show is these are some of the maps that people actually wrote on. And so this is one township in the county, this is another township, and this is a third township. I think that there are 12 altogether. And so it's really interesting to see kind of how different people's interpretations of what should be done in each place is, which I expected, but it's having a visual for it is pretty cool. So like up here, this person really only cares about a few little places. This person's really concerned about things along this river or highway or something. But this person has sort of, I don't know, it looks like they've sort of randomly spread things over the county. Like they had 5 uses and they just sort of like, but who knows, So it's interesting, and I'm right now kind of starting to think about how I'm going to digitize these maps and how they can be analyzed and what sort of information can really be pulled from them given how kind of crazy some of them are. So that's where I am now. And I guess if anybody has questions, we could do that next. I still have 5 minutes. Okay, well, I don't really have anything else to say, so if people want to ask questions, yes?
What were the instructions that you gave them prior to them filling these out?
So they're pretty simple instructions. I gave everybody a list of land uses so it would be somewhat standardized. I had them take their top 10 land uses and rank them. Then I had them take the top 5 of those 10 and color code those on the front of the map. So So like this person has planted agriculture, I don't know, I can't read that, conservation easement, national forest, and then they would just draw on the map kind of around, you can't really see in this image, but the land is broken into parcels based on private property boundaries and public property boundaries. And so I just said, you know, try to draw your lines along the edges of parcels if you can. Just sort of make it as legible as possible. And some people really followed that, and some people, like this person, kind of did not. So yeah, I mean, I gave people some leeway to do things sort of creatively, but I tried to make it sort of standardized. Yeah.
I'm sure you talked about this with John Maris, but did you have people draw where they live relative?
No, I didn't. I thought about that, and some people did it themselves. I kind of wanted to maintain more anonymity with it, you know? But I did say, I mean, I offered people, you know, these 12 different township maps, and I said, pick the township that, you know, you care about the most, what happens in it, or that you live in, or that you're most familiar with, you know? And so some people filled out more than one township map. Most people just did one. It took them a long time, usually, to sort of get into it. And some people were really just like, I don't even know what to do here. So that was interesting, too. Yeah?
Jillian, I think you have some recruiting bias, like you already mentioned, right? Going like
yes.
to the eco forum.
Yeah.
Kind of preaching to the choir.
Absolutely.
Here. Is there ways to, you know, look at, you know, other residents of the county, like going door to door and kind of somehow systematically choosing households to go do this at, or going to places where, you know, the average working person that's not retired and
yeah, so that's interesting. I was really, I really would like to get into that part of the community, and I did actually meet somebody recently who is a multi-generational individual, has many generations of family there. They were landowners for a long time, whatever, and he's well respected in the community, and he has said that he would help me put together a session that might include more people of the not wealthy, well-educated, you know, transplant variety. So I'm working on that. I also did try to go to the agricultural community, so I went to like some feed stores and things like that, and I tried to get people to pass out stuff, and they were like, I really don't think anyone's going to be interested in that. And I was like, okay. So
are the instructions easy enough where you could like drop it off with somebody, like give them like a 5-minute discussion, drop it off, and then come back and pick it up a couple days later?
I think that is possible. It is time consuming though. Like it usually takes about half an hour to 45 minutes for people to complete a map, and I'm not sure that people would be willing to do that. But that's certainly an interesting idea. Like, can I drop this off with you and come back next week or something? Like, that's a very interesting idea that I hadn't thought of. I wanted at one point to make an online, like a website where people could fill stuff out, but I haven't really found a way to do that I'm satisfied with, so, yeah. Yes?
Do you ever wonder if people can actually read maps? Like, I'm not too convinced that
I
people
did.
these days
So
can.
I did, but given that they were,
on Google Maps so
I know,
much, you know, so I just wonder,
Yeah.
like, can people really be able to like orient themselves or really orient the spaces that you're asking them to
I think
draw?
that some people had a harder time with it than others.
Yeah.
People really like maps. You know, I made a bunch of really big maps that I hang on the wall when I go somewhere. And it'll have like, you know, where the state-owned land is, where the federally owned land is, where the protected land is. And it also has like the private property parcels, so you can see where it's really dense and where it's more open. And people really get into looking at maps. So I think that your instinct about it and my original instinct is a little bit not correct, you know, and that we worry that people are not aware of space anymore or places.
I think that people are interested, but I'm thinking about, like, so Brian's question about drawing where they live.
Yeah.
And then seeing, you know, how does people's perceptions of like space and distance, I think, is probably off. I think maybe that's what I'm trying to say, is that can they really understand like actually what the boundaries of that parcel mean, like in relation to their everyday life?
It's a good question. I don't know. You know, I do know that people who live up there are probably more involved in the space around them than, say, people who live in a suburb somewhere, you know, because who's going to wander around their suburb, you know, exploring, right? I mean, I kind of do, but I have dogs, so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, you know, it's a good question. Yeah.
What sample size would you feel comfortable making recommendations to policymakers with?
I would want it to be a lot bigger than the 20 or so people that I have right now. I would like to do like 100 at least. I don't think that that's really big enough, but given how difficult it is to get people to participate, I think that's kind of where I would start to feel comfortable. And I did talk to Nick about this a few times, that sort of the idea that at some point, maybe you wouldn't start to get any new information from people, and maybe that would be the point when you would say, okay, we've got it. You know, if you start to get really similar responses from people. Now, it doesn't seem like that's happened, really. It seems like everybody has a pretty unique view, but yeah. Yeah.
Another strategy you could do is do like a choice experiment, which is just a survey, with having them kind of rank different scenarios of like land use.
Yeah,
and
that's an
then
interesting
have that
idea.
Coupled with these maps. Like, you're not going to be able to get 100 people to fill out these maps. That's really tough. But you could get 300 people with a couple of weeks of work to fill out like a 1 or 2 page survey that kind of had them rank land use priorities. Then you could use that with the maps.
Okay, that's a really good idea.